Hey everybody, JB back with you once again for another board game cube shelf run-through video. In this one, we're going to be looking at the 10th shelf, which has a mixture of both old and new stuff. I'm going to start with the new and then we're going to visit the old at the end. So let's go and dive in. The first game we've got here is not really a new one in terms of release, but this edition of it is new, and I bought it last year at a local game store with a gift certificate I got. Jaipur. Jaipur is a really fun two-player only trading game that uses just cards and chips, but it manages to cram a very simple, elegant design in the box. On your turn, you can either take cards or trade them in the central market, or you could take some camels that are at the market, which can either be used as trading leverage, or you can collect them for a bonus if you have the most. You can turn in your cards to get chips and potentially gain points, and the best of three wins the game pretty much. It's really fun. I like this one a lot just because it's simple. For me at least, it's in the same category as stuff like The Fox and the Forest, where I wouldn't mind bringing it on a first date if the other person is really comfortable with games and wants to play something. There's also an app for it, which I haven't tried out, but I've heard is a nice implementation. And this particular edition has some very gorgeous artwork from artist Vincent Dutrait, who we're going to be hearing about a little bit more in quite a few future videos, I think. So that's Jaipur. Very fun, very engaging, just a nice, relaxing two-player game. Definitely recommend this one. All right, the next game is a rather interesting one. This one is definitely very recent in terms of release, and I'm very convinced that this is going to be showing up in a lot of game awards conversations this year, and that is The Crew: The Quest for Planet 9. The Crew is one of those games that I can't believe no one has thought of before, because it feels like it's the sort of thing where the DNA of this could easily be found in other games, but the way it combines those strands of DNA is actually kind of interesting. I don't know if that's really an appropriate metaphor, but this game combines two entire genres of games that you wouldn't really think would necessarily work, but they totally do, and that's cooperative games and trick-taking card games. So most people know trick-taking games. You have a bunch of cards with a bunch of different suits. In this case, you have 4 suits and then a 5th one that's like a trump suit here. So you have the blue, pink, green, yellow cards, and then those rocket cards. There's only 4 of them, but they're the trump cards. The normal color cards only have 9 apiece. And normally in a trick-taking game, you lay down a card to lead a trick, everybody else follows suit, and if they can't, then they can play anything else, or the trump suit if they have it, and then whoever has the most tricks at the end of the game will win. Well, what's really interesting about this is that it introduces a cooperative element. Now, for some people, this may not be new, who have played things like bridge and whatnot, but this kind of goes full hog with it, and it does it in such a way that keeps the game fresh every time. So the rulebook for this game, I'm actually going to open this up to show you what I mean here. The rulebook of this game can be flipped over from its normal side to this side to show a logbook that has 50 challenges to play. Think of these as like levels in a video game. And whenever you open up one of these challenges, you're going to be greeted with a number here at the top right. Now, what these are is an indicator of how many cards you must draw from a separate deck called the task card deck. And the task deck is a replica of the normal deck, except with smaller cards and without the rocket card. So it has 36 cards you could draw from. So on level 1, you only get 1 task. Level 2, you get 2 tasks. The trick with this, so to speak, is that the person who draws the card must then win a trick that contains that card in it in the real deck. So for example, if I was handed the green 3, for example, then I have to win a trick that contains the green 3 in it somehow throughout the round. The other wrinkle in this is that you can't disclose the contents of your hands to each other. You can't say, well, I've got blah, 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 so therefore we can just plan everything out this way. Instead, you use these tokens, you're each assigned one of them, to lay down a card that's in your hand in front of you, and then you place the token on the top to indicate that it's the highest of that suit, at the bottom to indicate it's the lowest of that suit, or in the middle to say it's the only one of that suit. And as people do this, because you can do it asynchronously throughout the game, you can start to infer what people's hands look like or maybe what they want you to do, which is a really interesting hook. I've only played this game a few times, admittedly on the easier levels that are here in this first page. You can kind of tell that things start to get a little more complicated by introducing an order to the two tricks that must be won, etc. What I enjoy about this, though, is that it has a very replayable set of conditions to work with, for lack of a better way of putting it. Because even though you get into crazy complicated things here toward the end, where you have to do crazy things with the tokens, you have to win with certain cards. Like you can only win with pink cards, I think was one of the conditions or something like that, which sounds crazy. But like the game's different because every time you play it, you're going to be drawing different tasks. So even though there's only 50 things, you could just play those things over and over again. I'm really looking forward to getting this back to the table when the quarantine ends. Mainly just because I can't really play this solo, so it would be nice to play this with friends once that everything wraps up. That's the crew. Definitely look out for this one. I think it's going to get a lot of buzz as the year goes on. All right, the next game here is a game I bought at Gen Con last year. I was actually taught this game by a man named Paul Grogan, who runs the YouTube channel Gaming Rules. And he does an incredible job explaining rules for a lot of really complicated games. Thankfully, though, this one's not that complicated. It's called Letter Jam. It's called a cooperative word game, and it has probably one of the starkest but coolest covers I have ever seen in a game, with some really nice typography up here. I love how that L looks like it's being spread there like jam. And then the strawberry has actual letters as the seeds, which is kind of neat. This game is put out by Czech Games Edition, who did Codenames. They're probably most well known for Codenames. This game, though, is quite a bit more complex than Codenames in terms of explaining the rules, and it takes quite a bit longer as well. But it's a really satisfying game to play. Every time I've taught this to people, they are eager to try it again at some point. The premise of it is very captivating, in my opinion. It's one of the most interesting game hooks that I've seen. Everybody's dealt a giant pile of cards, and they pick 5 of them to form a word that they hand to their neighbor, face down. The cards are all shuffled up and put into a row of 5 in front of them, face down on the table, and they have to figure out either what that word is or spell something out using all 5 of those cards without looking at a single one. And that may sound impossible, but the way it works is that everybody takes one card at a time from that row, props it up on a stand such that it's facing away from them, and they can see everybody else's but not their own. And then on every round of the game, everyone has to make these bids for clues in terms of words that they can form with the letters they see. So right now, let's say I was handed this clue right here. Like somebody else could see all 5 of these letters, and they said, okay, I can use maybe 5 different people's letters, and I can form a word that's 5 letters long. That would be a bid. So everybody's going to bid, and then they all pick who the clue giver is going to be. Then that person takes these chips and spells out a word like this. So let's say I was sitting from this perspective and I didn't see that middle letter. I can see W-A blank E-R, and I'm writing this down on a sheet, which is not shown here in the box, but there's a sheet that the game comes with that you can write on. And so I start having to make deductions about what this could be, and maybe I don't go on to the next letter until I get another clue. So is it a G or a T or maybe even an F? I don't know. So I have to really be careful about what this word could be or couldn't be. And so you keep doing this until you go through all 5 letters or time runs out in terms of the amount of clues you have. I like this game because everybody's involved. Like the game actually incentivizes you to have multiple people give clues because everybody needs the clues. So you can't just have one person doing everything. And you also get a bonus few turns if you are able to have everybody give a clue, which is pretty cool. This is a game that I must admit is not necessarily for everybody. I mean, I think it's for a very specific kind of word gamer. but I do think it's a lot of fun. I don't think I would call it a party game like some people might, but I do think it's a really fun game for people who do enjoy words and deduction. That's Letter Jam. Okay, one of the newest games here for the collection is this one, and it is the first game of quite a few from this company, BoardGameTables.com. I'm trying to find their logo here. Oh, there it is right there. And that is Bytes. Bytes is a reimplementation of a 2008 game called Big Points, which was released only in German, I believe. It didn't come here to the US. But this design is very slick. It originally came out with an abstract look where it had just simple wooden discs and pawns to move around. But here you have ants and picnic food, which is pretty neat. So the game, the back of the box doesn't actually show the setup here, it just shows the components. But you take all this food, you mix it all up, and then you deal it out into a long line that leads to this anthill. And then you have these 5 ants. You can see them there toward the top. These ants are going to move toward the anthill by stopping only on the food that matches their color. So for example, the yellow ant will stop on the cheese, and the red ant will stop on the apples, and so on. The brown ant goes to bread. So on your turn, you can move any ant you want, and you can stop on the next food of your choice, the next food of that color. And then you can make a choice about whether or not you want to grab the food in front of it or the food behind it. But of course, by doing that, you're potentially shortening the path of an ant behind it, but you're also collecting the food to do some set collection with. The trick, though, is that the food doesn't really have any worth until the ants make it back. And what order they reach the anthill determines how valuable the food is. So for example, let's say the yellow ant got back first, and so then all cheese is worth 4 points. So maybe you want to take cheese early on so that the yellow ant has less to work with in terms of getting to the anthill. Oh, but then your opponents see what you're doing, so then they don't move the yellow ant around. And it's just a lot of really interesting interactions and a very neat implementation of commodity speculation in a game without like a stock market theme. What I like about this one is not only are the components really nice, it has this double layered cardboard for the food, which I have never seen before, but is really slick. The other thing I like about it is that it comes with these cards. You can see the 4 little decks of cards there. Those are variable playing conditions. So the red ones dictate the order of the anthill in terms of how they step onto it. The yellow ones and the brown ones pertain to wine and chocolate, which are special food items that do various special things. And then the blue ones are special rules that you can add to the game. You just draw one of them per game and you go play away. It's such a simple game. I like this one a lot. I can't tell you just how much this has gone over so well every time I've introduced it to friends. It's also nice for remote gameplay too over Skype in this kind of season. Bytes is a real winner. BoardGameTables.com, well, I'm going to be talking about them in the next couple of videos, but they've been doing a lot of these very simple games. I'm to the point now where I'm seriously looking forward to basically everything that they announce. So that's Bytes, and yeah, check this one out. Good family game. All right, speaking of stock market stuff, this next game is one that just came in the mail, and I haven't even played it yet because it's not really solo friendly, but I'm really looking forward to playing it, and that's Stockpile, a stock market game of insider trading, which is totally illegal in real life, but in a game, it's a lot of fun. This is a set collection game where you are having to create these piles of cards, but everybody has limited and somewhat different cross-sections of information that they're working with as far as how much things are going to go up or down at the end of a round. So you're going to be putting things into these piles, and then everybody drafts the different piles. Or no, I think it's like an auction or something like that. And then there's all these other things where you can play action cards into the piles that force people to pay stuff. It's a very slick design, and I love the player interaction element of it, which is why I bought it. I say that having never played it and just looking at the rules, but it looks like a lot of fun and a really neat game, so maybe one day I can tell you more about this one. But that's Stockpile. It seems like it takes its theme very lightheartedly. It's very cartoonish. It doesn't involve like a lot of heavy economic kind of theming or anything like that. It's just really silly fun. I'm looking forward to trying this one out. I think it'll be a blast. All right, the last three games here are games from a company called Days of Wonder, who's done a lot of very well-produced games, and arguably their most well-known game is this one from 2004 called Ticket to Ride. This is become one of the staples, I think, of modern gaming. It's won the Spiel des Jahres, as seen there in 2004. I was about to say 2004. It's spawned a lot of different expansion maps and spin-offs. More recently, there's been like miniature versions of this game that have come out. And the premise is very, very easy to understand. If you've played Rummy or anything like Rummy, it's very easy to understand. You are collecting cards in order to turn them in to lay down train cars of your color on segments of this map. So this is the base game that has the map of the United States, but there's expansions that have maps of other places, both big and small. I have the Europe one here as well. I've played a few of the other ones via the app for the game, which offers, I think, just about all of them. Maybe not the newest ones, but just about all of them, I think. I like this game because it's very accessible. I think some of the rules, if this were released today, might be a little different and maybe a little less punitive, because if you don't complete your routes that are you're handed at the very beginning as objectives, you lose points. I think these days that probably wouldn't fly as much with the way games are nowadays. But this is still a lot of fun. The Europe map adds stations that you can lay down in case you miss part of your route and people claim it. I think this is that kind of thing that has the potential to be that gaming staple that you see in a like grandma's attic in 50 years. There's just so many different versions of it that it's prolific enough to make that kind of impact. It's also got a nice accessible theme of travel, which everybody likes travel, right? Especially in an era like this. That's Ticket to Ride. Okay, the next two games here are by the same designer, Bruno Cathala, although I think this first one was co-designed with a guy named Mark Packian. And that is Yamatai first here. This is kind of an underrated game from a few years ago from Days of Wonder that hasn't gotten a lot of buzz. It's hard to describe as well. Maybe that's part of the reason why it hasn't gotten a lot of buzz. It's the best way I can describe it is a networking routing game where you are sending boats, which you can kind of see there, off to these different islands, or I should say the channels around the different islands. And based on what boats are around there, you can build buildings on here and collect tokens that you can turn in to get these specialists and whatnot. One of the things I like about this is that it has probably one of my favorite mechanisms for turn order, where you lay out these 5 different tiles that have a position in turn order, with I think the higher number ones being later, but offering cooler rewards. And you take those at the beginning to get stuff, but also secure your position in that order. It's a very neat mechanism, and it keeps the game pretty variable every time you play it based on how it's all jumbled up and what 5 are drawn there. The game itself with its routing kind of reminds me a little bit of Catan in some ways, although not exactly. I would say it's maybe a more communal version of that because everybody's working with the same stuff. But like what boats you put around and how they overlap with each channel network or matrix that's around each island and whatnot is kind of an interesting thing to see. It's a really neat concept, and I wish more games would do stuff like this. I think it's pretty cool. That's Yamatai. All right, and finally, we have one of my favorite games, 5 Tribes. 5 Tribes is one of Bruno Catala's most well-known designs. It's got this Arabian Nights theme. If I show you the back of the box here, you can see this network of tiles, all modular, that you lay out, and then there's meeples on each one. It's a very Mancala-style game where you pick up a group of meeples and then start dropping them one at a time, forming like a route as you're doing it, and then you end your movement on a tile where the last meeple in your hand matches one that's on there. you pick them up, and then you get to do an action associated with that color of meeple that you ended with, and then you get to do what's the action on the tile. This game is one of those games that I must admit is probably not for everybody because it's a little overwhelming with the amount of choice you have, especially at the start. It's sort of the opposite of Yamatai, where in that game you enter with few choices and you end with more. And in this game, the game kind of tightens more, where you start with a lot and then you end with fewer choices. There's all kinds of things to do. You can clear out tiles to put camels on them for points, which is a form of ownership by the end. You can collect merchandise from this market and form diverse sets of those. You can gain money from the blue meeples, which is also points at the end. This is essentially a point salad game. There's also the ability to recruit these djinns, or the anglicized word is genies, where each of them has a special ability, much like the specialists in Yamatai. They also give you points, and they can sometimes provide activation effects for a cost and whatnot. There's just a lot going on here, but it's one of those games that feels clever to play. Like whenever you pull off that move where you can get like 40 points in one turn, you just want to pump your fist in the air. It's just so much fun. The expansions also add additional stuff like a 6th color of meeples, items that you can collect that have either points or special abilities. And then the second expansion adds these city tiles where you kind of don't want everybody to let one person get control of all of them. So you want to focus on them to a degree. And then they have objectives, which I like because they keep the game a little bit more focused in some ways and give you direction. This is admittedly a very abstract game, but it's one that I like every time I play it. I enjoy it even more than the last time I played it every time. That is 5 Tribes. All right, we are at the end of this video, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. Next time, we're going to move on to Shelf 12, which is this one over here. This one, I'm going to go ahead and just tease it right now, is probably my favorite shelf in the entire unit here. It's got a lot of really cool games. I'm really excited to talk about this one. So until then, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed yourselves today. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that bell to get notified of the next episode. But until then, take care, and I will see you next time.